Yarden Walker had exactly $3 in his wallet, a half-full gas tank, and a 5-year-old daughter who needed new sneakers. So when the silver Bentley clipped the front of his beat-up truck at the corner of Maple and 6th, the last thing he expected was to run to the other car, heart pounding not from anger but worry. "Hey, are you okay?" he said, crouching next to the driver's side window. The airbag had deployed, and through the haze he saw her eyes wide, chest rising fast but very much alive. I think so." She whispered, dazed. He pulled the door open and held out his hand. "Can you move?" "Nothing broken," she blinked at him, confused, her long dark hair tangled around her face. "No, I'm fine, just shaken." "Come here," he said gently, helping her out with both arms. She was light, trembling. Her heels wobbled as she stepped onto the pavement. "I got you. Just breathe." She clung to him, and it hit him how warm she was, real, frightened, and how insanely expensive her car looked. He glanced at the front. The Bentley's bumper had a dent, but her windshield was intact. His truck, on the other hand, had lost a headlight. Of course it had. "I'm so sorry," she said suddenly, pulling back. "I wasn't paying attention, I didn't see the light change." "It's all right," Yarden said. "You're okay, and that's what matters." A siren wailed in the distance. Her eyes darted toward it. "You need to sit," he asked. "I got a truck right there. It's not much, but no, I'm okay. I'm just embarrassed," she said, rubbing her temple. "I'm usually not this careless," he nodded, unsure what to say. She was stunning, even with mascara smudged from shock. Her black blazer clung to her like it had been sewn onto her. She looked like someone from a magazine, not someone who should be standing on the edge of a crosswalk in downtown Portland. "I'm Yarden," he said, offering his hand. She hesitated, then shook it. "Palina." "Palina Greer." "Nice to meet you," he said, his voice low, "even if it's like this." The cops arrived, asked questions, and took statements. When they were done, Yarden walked Palina to the curb. She looked out of place next to the concrete and rusted street sign, like she'd been dropped from another planet. "Do you need someone to call?" he asked. She shook her head. "My driver's on his way. He'll take care of the car." "Driver?" Yarden raised a brow but didn't comment. "You sure you're all right?" Palina hesitated. "Yeah, I've been having a rough day, week actually." Yarden rubbed the back of his neck. "Me too." They stood quiet for a second, then she looked up at him, really looked, and said, "Can I ask you something weird?" "Sure. Why were you so kind?" "Most people would have been yelling or demanding insurance." He shrugged. "I've got a daughter, 5 years old. If it had been her in that car one day, I'd hope someone would help her instead of screaming at her." Palina's eyes softened. "What's her name?" "Vera," he said, his voice warm. "She's got more sass than a room full of lawyers." She smiled slightly, but he caught the way her eyes misted. "I'm sorry again," she said. "For the accident." "It's nothing," Yarden said. "We all have days." The Bentley's replacement driver pulled up sleek, black, silent. Palina looked at it like she wanted to run the other way. "I don't want to go back to that world yet," she said under her breath. Yarden frowned. "What world?" She waved a hand vaguely. "Work, phones, people who care more about image than actual feelings." He didn't push. But she turned back to him, eyes searching his face. "Would it be crazy if I asked you to have a coffee with me?" Yarden blinked. Now she gave a small laugh. "Yeah, I know it's weird, but I don't want to go back to my penthouse right now and be alone with my thoughts." Penthouse. Yarden didn't say anything, but his brain did somersaults. He glanced at his truck still crooked on the curb. "I can't. I gotta pick up Vera in an hour." But he pulled out a scrap of paper from his glove box and scribbled down his number. "If you ever need someone to talk to who doesn't care what car you drive, call me." She took it, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you." Then she got in the car and drove away. Yarden stood there for another full minute, heart pounding. That woman wasn't just rich, she was something else. Real, sad. And for some reason, she'd looked at him like he was the first normal thing she'd seen all day. He picked up Vera from daycare just before 5. She ran into his arms, pigtails bouncing. "Daddy," she squealed. "Guess what? I drew a dragon and a unicorn and they're best friends." He laughed and scooped her up. "That's amazing, baby." But all night, as he microwaved boxed mac and cheese and helped her glue glitter to cardboard, he kept thinking about Palina Greer, the way she looked at him. The way her voice cracked when she said she didn't want to go back to her world, and the way it felt, holding her in his arms even just for a moment. He didn't expect to hear from her again. So when his phone rang the next evening and he picked up to hear her say, "Hey, it's Palina. I was wondering if you and Vera might like to come to the zoo with me tomorrow." He almost dropped the phone. "You want to go to the zoo?" he repeated. "With you," she said, "and your daughter, if that's okay." "I'd really love to meet her." Yarden looked down at Vera, who was coloring a lopsided heart. "That'd be more than okay," he said. And just like that, everything started to change. Yarden adjusted the straps on Vera's backpack as they stepped through the front gates of the zoo. The morning air was cool, but the sun was already warming the pavement, casting scattered shadows through the trees. Vera held his hand tightly, practically vibrating with excitement. "Are there real giraffes here?" she asked, craning her neck as if she might spot one from the entrance. "Real ones, yeah," he said. "And they love kids who ask a lot of questions, so I think you'll get along fine." She giggled, swinging her arm. "Do they like glitter? I guess we'll find out." Then he saw her. Palina stood near the ticket kiosk, dressed in soft cream trousers and a pale blue blouse that looked like it belonged in a fashion spread. A pair of sunglasses rested on her head, but she wasn't wearing them. She looked different in daylight, calmer, somehow, but there was still something fragile in the way she held her posture, like she was bracing herself. Her eyes lit up when she saw them. "There's my favorite duo," she said, kneeling slightly to greet Vera. "You must be Vera." "Your dad told me you're part dragon and part unicorn." Vera tilted her head. "Did he really say that?" "Word for word," Palina said. "And I brought something for you." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a small plush giraffe with a bright yellow bow around its neck. Vera gasped. "That's my favorite animal, really?" Palina asked, straightening. "I had a feeling." Yarden watched Vera hug the toy like it was a treasure and then looked at Palina. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she said, meeting his gaze. "Besides, I figured she deserved a proper welcome." They walked into the zoo together, Vera leading the way with her new giraffe tucked under one arm, tugging Yarden forward every few steps. Palina kept pace beside him, her eyes flicking between the exhibits and the little girl skipping ahead. "I haven't been here since I was in middle school," she said after a while. "Back then, I thought the flamingos were the fanciest animals alive." He glanced at her. "Let me guess, they reminded you of some fashion show." "No," she said, smiling faintly. "They reminded me of my mother. Always standing tall, always dressed to impress, and always just a little out of reach." He didn't press, but the way she said it told him more than she probably meant to reveal. They paused at the elephant habitat, watching the animals shuffle through the grass. Vera pressed her face to the railing, completely entranced. "She doesn't stop moving, does she?" Palina asked softly. "Only when she sleeps, and even then I think she's dreaming up new games." There was a brief silence before Palina turned to him. "You're doing a good job," he raised a brow. "How do you know?" "I can see it," she said. "The way she looks at you, the way you talk to her like she's the most important person in the world, that's not common." He didn't know how to respond to that, so he didn't. They watched Vera race ahead to the next exhibit, her ponytail flying behind her. "Do you ever get tired?" Palina asked after a moment. "Doing it all on your own," he rubbed the back of his neck. "Most days, yeah, but I'd rather be tired than miss anything." She nodded slowly. "I respect that." They stopped for lunch at a shaded patio near the penguin enclosure. Vera talked nonstop about what she'd seen so far, her plate of chicken nuggets barely touched. Palina listened intently, asking questions like she was genuinely invested, not just being polite. When Vera ran off to the nearby play area, Yarden finally leaned back and exhaled. "She likes you," he said. Palina smiled. "She's incredible, you know that, right?" "I do," he said quietly. "She's the best thing I ever did." Palina's expression shifted. "I've been thinking about the other day. About what happened, and I realized I haven't done something spontaneous in years. Going to the zoo with a stranger and his daughter isn't exactly a typical billionaire move," he said, watching her reaction. She didn't flinch. "I'm not typical." He studied her for a long moment. "You don't talk like someone who has everything." "That's because I don't," she said. "Not the things that actually matter." He waited. "My father passed away last month," she said finally. "He left me the company. The board can't decide if they want to control me or replace me." and everyone I used to trust either wants something or already took it. Yarden didn't say anything. He just listened. I was driving that day because I just walked out of a meeting where half the room told me I'd never be good enough to fill his shoes. I wasn't watching the road because I was trying not to cry. He leaned forward. Then I'm glad I was there. Her eyes met his. I didn't mean to pull you into my mess. You didn't, he said. But if you ever need someone who doesn't give a damn about your last name or your balance sheet, I'm around. That's dangerous, she said, her voice low. Why? Because I might take you up on it. They sat in silence for a while, watching Vera swing from a rope ladder, her laughter echoing. Then Palina turned to him again. Would you let me help you? He frowned. With what? Anything. I know you're proud, but sometimes even the strongest people need someone in their corner. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the sincerity in her face, no pity, no agenda. I don't want a handout, he said. I'm not offering one, she replied. I'm offering something else, a chance for both of us. Vera ran over then, interrupting whatever he might have said. Her cheeks were flushed and she held up the stuffed giraffe. Her name is Marigold, she declared. Palina knelt. That's a perfect name. Can she come home with us? Yarden met Palina's eyes. Only if Miss Greer says yes. I think Marigold would like that, Palina said. As they walked toward the exit, Vera between them, holding both their hands, Yarden felt something shift. Not something loud or dramatic, just a small, quiet click. Like a door opening where he hadn't even noticed one existed, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was walking alone. Palina stood beside the kitchen counter of Yarden's small home, her hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug. The scent of cinnamon tea curled through the air, soft and warm. She watched as Vera, now in her pajamas and curled up on a pile of blankets in the living room, fell into a deep sleep halfway through a picture book she'd insisted on reading to both of them. She lasted longer than I thought, Palina said quietly. Yarden dried his hands with a dish towel and leaned against the opposite counter. She only gets that much energy out when she really likes someone. He crossed his arms, not for distance, but to slow the buzzing in his chest. Palina had been at his house for over 2 hours now. She'd followed them home after the zoo at Vera's insistence, and after a reluctant stop, at a drive-through for milkshakes. Vera had offered her half-melted sprinkles and declared her not fancy anymore, which oddly seemed to please Palina more than anything else could have. You didn't have to say yes, Yarden said, to coming here. I know, she said, but I didn't want the day to end. He studied her posture, relaxed but thoughtful, and the way her gaze kept drifting toward the living room like she couldn't quite believe she'd been invited into a world this simple. What's it like? He asked. Your everyday, she hesitated. Chaotic, structured, cold most days. I have a calendar so full my assistant had to color code it just so I wouldn't miss board meetings. I have 7 lawyers on retainer. And I haven't sat in silence for more than 10 minutes in over a year. Sounds exhausting. It is, she said, but it's also all I've ever known. I started working under my father when I was 19. I was in charge of a department by 22. Every step of my life has been about proving I deserve the title I inherited. You don't seem like someone who needs to prove anything. She gave a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. That's because today I wasn't trying. Yarden poured himself a glass of water, then leaned back against the counter again. You ever think about walking away from all of it? Her eyes flicked toward him. More times than I can count. But I never let myself say it out loud. Why not? Because I was raised to believe that quitting is failure, that walking away means weakness, and if I'm weak, I lose everything. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he took a long sip of water and looked toward the living room, where Vera now snored softly, hugging the giraffe Palina had given her. You know, he said eventually, I don't think it's weakness to want something more real. She looked down at her tea. What if I don't know how to do real? Then maybe that's where I come in. Palina's gaze lifted slowly. You'd help me figure that out if you let me. She didn't look away. You're not scared of me, are you? No, he said. Should I be? Most men are. Not because I'm cruel, but because I have power, influence, and I don't hide it. Yarden shrugged. Power doesn't scare me, pretending does. Palina set her mug on the counter and crossed the small space between them. She stopped just short of him, eyes searching his, her voice barely above a whisper. You make me forget what pretending feels like. He didn't touch her, not yet, but he didn't step back either. You're not the only one who's been pretending, he said. They stood there for a long, suspended moment, the only sound the ticking of the wall clock and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Then a small, sleepy voice called out from the living room. Daddy? Yarden moved instantly, brushing past Palina without hesitation. Vera sat up with tangled hair and half-lidded eyes. I had a dream, she mumbled. There were stars on the ceiling. He crouched beside her, smoothing her hair. Just a dream, baby, you're safe. Palina watched from the kitchen doorway, her heart twisting at the quiet intimacy of the moment. There was something about the way Yarden looked at his daughter, not with obligation, but with reverence that made her throat tighten. I want the stars again, Vera murmured, tugging at his sleeve. He smiled. Then let's make some. Yarden got up, fetched a small box from the hallway closet, and returned with a handful of glow-in-the-dark stickers. Palina knelt beside them, and together they helped Vera stick stars across the underside of the coffee table where she liked to build her forts. When Vera finally drifted back to sleep beneath her blanket canopy, Palina stood and quietly followed Yarden back into the kitchen. She's lucky, she said. So am I, he replied. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was full. Full of things neither of them could name yet, but both of them felt. He walked her to the door when it was time for her to leave. The porch light flickered slightly above them. You okay to drive? He asked. She nodded. I've got a driver waiting. Of course you do. But instead of stepping away, she lingered. I needed today, she said. More than I thought I would. Then consider it the first of many. She looked up at him, something unspoken flickering in her eyes. You're not what I expected, Yarden. Neither are you. She leaned in, just enough for her perfume to brush against his shirt. Tell me something real. He didn't hesitate. I don't care about your last name, or your money, or your driver. Her breath caught, but she didn't pull back. I care that when you laugh, it sounds like you haven't in too long. I care that you looked at my daughter like you saw her, not like she was in the way. I care that tonight, for the first time in a while, I don't feel like I'm carrying everything alone. She stared at him, stunned into silence. Then she stepped closer, her fingers brushing his. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too, he said. And for the first time, neither of them ran from it. The following weeks unfolded like scenes from someone else's life, someone luckier, someone lighter. Yarden had never imagined himself fitting into any world outside long hours, short paychecks, and bedtime stories whispered by nightlight. But now, every few days brought something new. A quiet walk through the botanical gardens after Vera's ballet class, a last-minute invitation to a private gallery showing Palina had helped fund, an afternoon spent teaching Vera how to fly a kite on the cliffs above the coast while Palina sat barefoot in the grass, laughing like the sky had never felt so wide. But none of it compared to now. Now, he stood in the middle of a ballroom that looked like it had been plucked from a royal daydream. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, casting golden light across marble floors and towering floral arrangements. A string quartet played somewhere near the high arched windows, and Yarden, dressed in a dark tailored suit that Palina had sent over with a note that simply said, "Trust me," felt like he'd been dropped into a dream. Vera was safe for the night, tucked in at Palina's personal assistant's apartment with a box of toys and a long list of bedtime instructions Yarden had nervously recited twice. He hadn't wanted to leave her, but Palina had asked him to come tonight. She hadn't told him why. Now he knew. Because at the far end of the ballroom, standing beneath an arch of white roses and soft candlelight, Palina was giving a speech. My father built Greer Holdings with a singular vision, she said, her voice carrying easily without the need for a microphone. But he didn't build it alone. He surrounded himself with people who challenged him, who believed in more than just numbers. And I intend to do the same. There was a murmur of polite approval, but she wasn't finished. Starting tonight, we are launching the Greer Foundation initiative dedicated to supporting single-parent families, trade education, and community housing. Because financial power means nothing if it doesn't show up where it matters most. The applause was louder this time, but Yarden stood frozen. She looked directly at him when she said it. After the speech, she found him near a tall window overlooking the city skyline. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside him, watching the lights flicker below as if the streets themselves were breathing. "You okay?" she asked finally. He cleared his throat. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," she said. "Not because of you, because of me, because I've spent my whole life pretending I was happy chasing power. But I've never felt more grounded than I did standing in your kitchen with a mug I could actually hold with both hands." He turned to face her. "That foundation, those programs, that's going to change people's lives." "I hope so," she said, "but I'm not done." He raised a brow. Palina stepped closer, her voice quiet. "I'm stepping down as CEO." Yarden blinked. "You're what?" "I'm promoting someone who actually wants the title. I'll stay on the board, but I'm done living in glass towers and conference rooms. I want something else now." He could barely find words. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." She reached for his hand. "I want a life where I can wake up and make pancakes without checking 3 calendars. I want to be able to show up for someone not because I'm expected to, but because I choose to. I want to see Vera's school plays and help her build glitter castles." He stared at her, heart pounding. "That's not something you say lightly." "I'm not saying it lightly," she said. "I'm saying it because I love you, and I'm in love with your daughter. And I've never been more certain about anything in my life." Silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, he lifted her hand to his chest. "You know I've been trying to hold myself back from saying it first." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't speak. "I love you," he said, voice firm. "And I don't care where we live or what we do. I just want to build something real, with you, with Vera." Palina exhaled, her chest rising like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. "Then let's build it." He kissed her then, not rushed, not desperate, just full of quiet certainty. The kind of kiss that said this is where everything starts. Months passed, but the life they built didn't look like anyone else's. The tiny 2-bedroom Yarden had rented for years was replaced by a sunlit house on the edge of the city, spacious but warm, with a porch swing Vera insisted they hang for reading days. Palina didn't retreat from the world, but she re-entered it on her own terms, hosting free workshops for young entrepreneurs, investing in shelters, and walking hand in hand with Yarden at community fundraisers wearing jeans and no security detail. One autumn afternoon, Vera came home with a drawing of her family. Yarden, Palina, herself, and a giraffe with a golden bow. Palina framed it. They married quietly in the backyard the following spring, surrounded by roses, fairy lights, and the laughter of a little girl who now had 2 parents who showed up for every bedtime, every scraped knee, every whispered dream. And when Vera leaned over to whisper to Palina during the vows, asking if she could call her mom, Palina didn't cry. She simply said yes and meant it with her whole heart. The world outside kept spinning with its deals and deadlines, but inside the house on the hill, where pancakes were made without checking the time and stars were stuck to ceilings just because love had found its place, and it wasn't going anywhere. Rain tapped softly against the windows as Palina adjusted a pair of tiny hands around a rolling pin. Vera stood on a stool beside her, brow furrowed in concentration, pressing gingerbread dough into shapes with deliberate care. "That one's a giraffe," Vera said proudly, holding up a misshapen lump. Palina nodded solemnly. "Of course it is, and it's very fashion-forward." Vera giggled and reached for another cookie cutter. Yarden leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching them. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and sugar, and the warmth from the oven fogged the windows just enough to soften the gray day outside. He hadn't said anything, yet he didn't want to break the stillness of the moment, but his heart swelled at the sight of the 2 people he loved most creating something together, flour dusting their cheeks like snow. "Think we've got enough for the whole neighborhood?" he asked finally. Vera gave a firm nod. "We have exactly enough for Mrs. Halvorson, the mailman, and the lady with the cat who always hides under her coat." Palina turned to him, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "We might have gone overboard. You're the one who bought 3 bags of flour. I was being ambitious." He grinned and stepped forward, pressing a kiss to her temple before lifting Vera off the stool. "Let's get you cleaned up, sugar dragon," she squealed as he swung her into his arms. Later that evening, once Vera was asleep upstairs tucked in with her newest drawing taped to the wall above her bed, Yarden, and Palina curled up on the couch under a soft knit blanket, the fire flickering low in the hearth. "I've been thinking," she said, tracing her finger along the edge of his hand. "Always dangerous," he teased, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I want to open something, a community space, not just a charity, a building people can walk into when they don't know where else to go. Somewhere with books and food and someone who listens." He sat up slightly to look at her. "That's not a small idea." "No," she said, "but it's the kind that keeps me up at night in a good way." "You want help?" he asked. "You're the first person I want on the team." He kissed her soft and slow. "Then we'll build it." She smiled against his mouth. "I already talked to the city about a property near the school. It has enough space for classrooms and a garden. We could run after-school programs, job training. Even parenting workshops." He blinked. "You've been busy." "I'm not used to waiting once I know what I want." He let out a low chuckle. "Remind me never to bet against you." Palina leaned back and looked around the room. A stack of children's books sat on the coffee table. A pair of tiny sneakers had been kicked off near the fireplace. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel still, it felt alive. "I used to be afraid of slowing down," she said. "It felt like failure, but now I don't want to miss any of this." "You won't," he said. "Not with us." Spring came early the following year. The new community center opened in March, with a ribbon-cutting ceremony held in front of the restored brick building Palina had named Haven House. Yarden stood beside her on the small stage they'd set up, Vera holding both their hands, beaming like she owned the place. Palina's voice didn't waver once as she spoke to the crowd of neighbors and city officials. But when she turned to Yarden and whispered, "I never imagined this would feel like home," he squeezed her hand and said, "That's because you built it with your heart, not your name." They spent their days tangled in laughter, sticky fingers, paint-streaked afternoons, and the quiet, steady rhythm of a life that no longer felt borrowed or temporary. On a warm summer night, after the last guests had left Vera's 6th birthday party in the backyard, Palina stood barefoot in the grass, her white sundress swaying as she lit a single lantern and released it into the sky. Yarden wrapped his arms around her from behind, watching it rise. "She asked for family photos this year," he murmured into her neck. "Said she wanted to hang them in her room." Palina turned, eyes shining. "She has one now." They danced slowly as the stars blinked above them, music drifting from the record player inside the house. There was no crowd, no spotlight, just the hum of summer crickets, the scent of lemon cake still lingering in the air, and the quiet certainty that they had found something strong and lasting in a world that often moved too fast. "This," she whispered. "This is everything." He kissed her, holding her close, and said, "You're everything." They didn't need chandeliers or penthouse views. They needed only each other, a little girl who believed in unicorns and giraffes, and a home filled with love, flour on the counters, and stars on the ceiling. And in that quiet corner of the world they built together. They lived fully, wildly, and without regret for all the days still to come.